Hi all, today I'm going to talk about plasma physics and its role in semiconductor processing. Uh, so any semiconductor process you see in foundry, semiconductor foundry, you will see lots and lots of equipments that are based on plasma physics. And since this was the project during my master's, and so I studied this a little bit, and that's the reason I thought that perhaps I would make a video on uh, plasma physics and its role in semiconductor processing. So I hope you guys will like this video, and uh, hopefully I will do justice to this topic. Another important note is that I am not a plasma physicist. I mean, I barely know about any intricacies of lots of processes that are involved in a plasma. However, I know plasma physics from the point of view of semiconductor processing, since it was my project during my masters at IIT Bombay, which is Mumbai now, IIT Mumbai. So, okay, let's see how this proceeds. And so in this tutorial, I am going to discuss about plasma physics for confined, mark this word confined, glow discharge. Now, confined means I am going to confine the plasma in obviously in a laboratory or in a foundry, semiconductor foundry. I'm going to confine the plasma in a container, and that container, the technical term for that container is a vacuum chamber, a properly designed vacuum chamber. All right. So confined and glow discharge. And glow discharge, if somebody remembers vacuum tubes, glow discharge was a kind of a sweet spot wherein you don't have an arc discharge, that is, there is no arcing happening, and also it's not like a totally dark thing, that is, it's just not neutral species inside the chamber. You do have basically some ionization and some recombination taking place, and because of that recombination in that gas, basically plasma gas, you are getting a particular light. For example, argon emits particular light, or let's say the tube lights, the old tube lights, if you remember, they used to also have some they used to develop some dark space after some time, your old tube lights in your homes. And that is again an example of basically plasma and what is called as sheath or cathode dark space, and that cathode dark space used to expand. Why? Because of the eventual loss of the ionization, eventual loss of the ions and the electrons to the walls of the tube or maybe to the filaments. So that's why you used to see that those tube lights, the black space used to become larger and larger as the years pass by. So that is a very simple household example of a confined plasma that I gave you. However, for semiconductor processing, uh, the kind of plasma that we talk about uses low pressure in the range of 1 millitorr to 100 millitorrs, and however high density. And why high density? We want high density plasma because we want to dope, let's say, what is the typical doping of a channel of a MOSFET? It is 10 raised to the power 17 per centimeter cube. For N plus P plus doping in for making a MOSFET, you need a doping of 10 raised to the power 18 to 10 raised to the power 19 per centimeter cube. So basically, that kind of for that kind of dopings, obviously you will require high density plasmas for a typical semiconductor processing requirement. Uh, Physics wise, what I'll be covering here in this tutorial is plasma sheath physics, aka Child-Langmuir law in steady state. Okay, I'm saying Child-Langmuir law in steady state. Why? Because I am first going to give you a picture of steady state, and a steady state for a plasma sheath is about Child-Langmuir law. and that is the reason I'm saying, you know, plasma sheath physics is basically governed by this steady state sheath. However, I will also talk about transient sheath, and in the importance of transient sheath is that that is the one that causes ion implantation. All right. Whereas a steady state sheath is something that gets formed in any plasma when you create inside a vacuum chamber. So, however, the transient sheath causes the ion implantation to take place. And we'll discuss the other applications of the semi plasmas in semiconductor processing as we'll go through the physics. Another aspect is the plasma bulk. So how the bulk physics is there, and how basically ionization happens, what are the ionization deionization rates, and everything is then a function of the collision frequency between the ions and the neutrals and the electrons and the neutrals and so on and so forth, and also the transport of the plasma. So plasma as a species, that is ionized ions and electrons, how the transport occurs. So basically you have a transport due to diffusion and a transport due to mobility. And so these things I will not be covering. The reason is that these things are not actually important as far as semiconductor processing is concerned, but they might be important for certain other applications wherein you want to increase the ionization rate, you want to confine the plasma, let's say using the magnets, and when you want to do all that stuff with the plasma, then you are basically dealing with the bulk and the transport of the species inside that bulk. And so uh, that might be, let's say, if you are a thermonuclear fusion engineer and you want to create a thermonuclear fusion device to create energy, then in that case you will basically need to study these things in detail. All right. Okay, so then let us start with the theory and the animation part of our tutorial series. All right. Before I start the main part, I would like to first mention is that plasma is also called as fourth state of matter. And what are the other three states? Obviously, solid, liquid, and gaseous state. And so here in the picture, I would first like to appreciate Mother Nature, that uh, something like a state of matter can be so beautiful. So this is the picture that I'm showing is of what is called as northern lights or aurora borealis. Hopefully my pronunciation of aurora borealis was correct. So you see these generally in the northern hemisphere, or if you go to southern hemisphere also you can see, I think, that what this is a, a canvas, being painted by so many colors, canvas of the night sky, painted by so many colors. And this thing happens because the the cosmic radiation, it ionizes certain molecules in the atmosphere of the earth, and those that ionization ultimately leads to formation of plasma and plasma glow discharge, actually, which is what I'm going to talk about in this tutorial. However, we'll be talking about confined plasmas, as I already said. This is not a confined plasma. And that's why you see different colors. It's not a single gas in the atmosphere that is being ionized. I mean, it's a lot of different kinds of gases which are emitting their different characteristic colors at different places. So really, Mother Nature at its best, I will say, is in plasma. You can see her magic in plasma. Uh, Now, one quick question: what differentiates plasma? What differentiates plasma from a heated gas? Because now you will definitely ask this question, because For example, in this picture, yeah, I mean, here you see some plasma formed somewhere in the atmosphere. Maybe if you see somewhere else, it might be just a dark sky. So why is only here it is happening, and why, so then maybe that cosmic radiation is also heating the gas here. Why is this heated gas here, not the plasma that is here? So the answer is kind of technical. The first and the foremost answer is ionization. So ionization is defined as the number of ions in a gas divided by the total number of neutral species or neutral molecules or atoms in that gas. All right. So that ratio is ionization, and that for plasmas is generally in the range of 10 raised to power minus 2 to 10 raised to power minus 3, according to reference 1. All right, which is a standard book on this plasma physics, and it is about 10 raised to power minus 6 for a heated gas. So obviously, if the gas has been heated here at all due to cosmic radiation or any other source, then, and if the heated gas is here, then obviously the ionization is around 10 raised to power minus 6 here, and here it will be 10 raised to power minus 2 to 10 raised to power minus 3, and that's why this is plasma and this is heated gas here, perhaps, right? Uh, okay, another important thing about plasma is that since you have an appreciable amount of ionization, you have to consider something that is called as Debye length. And this Debye length I will explain in detail later. However, right now, suffice to say, Debye length of a typical plasma, especially in laboratory conditions, is a few millimeter to tens of millimeters. All right, or I think in some cases it can also go to few centimeters also. So that is that. And another important property is that whatever the characteristic length that we are talking about, that should always be very, very much greater than the Debye length in order to consider that entire thing as plasma. Why? Because or entire conglomeration of hot particles as plasma, if you want to consider, then, and given the conditions number 1 and 2 have been satisfied, then also this third condition is also very important, that is the characteristic length that we are considering is much greater than the Debye length. And the reason for that will also be clear when I will explain the physics of plasmas, especially electrostatics of the plasma in detail in the next perhaps some slide after the next slide. And before I proceed to explain to you basic physics of plasma, I would like to first mention that a practical application of this plasma processing. So shown in the figure is a conventional ion implanter which consists of an ion source. Perhaps you have a filament that is heating up the gas, and then that heated gas is being extracted by a grid which is having a negative potential. So what this negative potential is going to do is it will basically capacitively couple with this gas and also create more ionization, and hence make this gas here enter into plasma state. And also the second job of this negative potential will be to extract the ions, okay, extract the ions out of this plasma, positively charged ions, and then as they get extracted, they will be they will undergo a change in their path like this, uh, through the help of mass separation magnets. Note that this method is also used in mass spectrometer to separate the masses, right? So till this part you can say this is the same as mass spectrometer. However, what happens afterwards is that you focus the beam again, the ion beam that you have extracted, and again do an acceleration on it, and then bombard that focused beam on the wafer, and the wafer will be obviously scanned, all right, for that beam. And the typical currents that the wafer current will be around milliampere, okay, some tens of milliampere. Now the major disadvantage of conventional ion implanter is that the max wafer current that is possible is 25 milliampere. And obviously, what does that mean? That so you can have 25 milliampere equivalent of dosage that you can impart maximally to the wafer, and that means that you have a restriction of the on the dosage. And what does a restriction on the dosage means? Dosage will be measured in the per centimeter square, right? So how many ions per centimeter square are being bombarded on the wafer to be implanted upon? So obviously that is again going to decide the doping, the volume doping in the number of dopants per centimeter cube that have been implanted, right? So this has been the biggest disadvantage of the conventional type ion implanter. That is, you need first of all these extra, mass spectrometer plus beam focusing and acceleration kind of things to steer the extracted ions towards the wafer. And second thing is that something that I already explained, that is the maximum current of 25 milliampere, which restricts the dosage. So this is an excellent example of plasma processing, because ion implantation is basically required to form sourced implants, to do threshold voltage adjust implant, to do all sorts of things. Without implantation, basically you don't have any semiconductor device. All right, so that's why I mentioned a very practical example of plasma processing in semiconductor foundry, which is an ion implanter. So here I am showing on the left hand side, I am showing a cross section of a toroidal uh, what is called as tomahawk, if I am correct. Uh, what this equipment does is that you have let's say hydrogen gas inside this, and you create a hydrogen plasma, and then if you do a thermonuclear fusion of hydrogen, then you can generate energy. And obviously it will require these magnets surrounding all these solenoids surrounding this tube to basically confine the plasma. And why do you want to confine the plasma particles into, let's say, helical paths? That is because you want to avoid the loss. I mean, you want to avoid the loss of the plasma species, and also you want to maintain the ionization so that this heated gas is actually in the plasma state. All right, so this is this, for example, this left hand side toroidal thermonuclear generation device. This is kind of a extreme kind of example that I took. On right hand side, you have actually now a fictional example of thermonuclear fusion. If you remember Tony Stark in Iron Man, he creates a similar toroidal kind of, actually not toroidal, it is actually circular kind of device, in which you can see probably these are the magnets which he has used probably for the confinement of the plasma, and then the plasma emitting its characteristic light here, it's bluish color, and then he uses this as a kind of battery to charge his suit, right? So I hope everybody remembers Tony Stark. I mean, who will not like to be a billionaire, you know, MIT graduate, engineer, and womanizer, and all that stuff. So, anyways, so this is a fictional example. However, uh, let me say, why will the arc reactor made by Tony Stark, why will that arc reactor not work? What do you think? Why this I definitely know for sure that if you create something like this, it will not work. And perhaps I will give you a hint. Check the next two slides for the answer. All right. So let's see why Tony Stark's arc reactor won't work. we'll we'll definitely have to now invest something in the physics of plasma. So let's do it. All right, so let's get back to the physics of plasmas. Now, what I'm going to explain in this slide is about the origin of Debye length. All right, and so the so what I'm going to talk about is purely electrostatics. All right, electrostatics of the plasma. So before that, I must explain this diagram first. All right. So I have a plasma creator. So what do you mean by plasma creator? So in a laboratory or in a semiconductor foundry, what a plasma creator is going to do is that it is going to create a plasma inside this vacuum chamber. So this is my vacuum chamber. And how am I creating vacuum? I'm using a turbomolecular pump, which is going to pump out the gas and create the vacuum. However, at the same time, if I just create a vacuum and nothing is there, then obviously whatever kind of energy I couple from here to create the plasma in this chamber, it won't create anything because it's just a vacuum. So what do you need? You need also a gas inlet that allows the precursor gas or whatever the gas of which you want to form plasma out of to enter into this vacuum chamber. So so obviously after some time there will be a equilibrium pressure, right? Because there is a gas inlet, gas outlet, and you can use some basic physics to basically know that ultimately there will be a the gas inside this chamber will have a particular pressure, okay, and that will be generated by the pump and the gas inlet, the rate of the gas flow inside and the rate of the pumping out, that will decide the pressure of the gas. All right. Now, so the electrostatic potential phi, all right, at any distance r from, let's say, let's consider, let's for simplification purpose, let us assume that the ions, which are this, these colored ions, they are, uh, they have single positive charge. Okay, let's do this assumption. And another thing that I'm saying is that let's consider this ion here that I'm showing, and let's consider this ion as the origin. All right, this ion is our origin, and now I want to find out this ion is inside this plasma that is being generated, and this plasma again is being divided into two regions. One is bulk, and another is the sheath. So sheath is, like I already explained, it's a cathode dark space, or in other words, a space which lacks of electrons, which doesn't have electrons, and it just gets formed whenever this plasma gets in touch with any wall. This kind of sheath will definitely get formed. Okay, which is also cathode dark space, and then you also have something like plasma bulk, in which you have electrons and the ions and the neutral species. All right, so this is what a plasma is. So the question is that, given this situation and your this ion as a frame of reference, what is the electrostatic potential phi at any distance r? All right, and if you solve for this simple electrostatics, what you will get is this result. Phi will be q by 4 pi epsilon naught r, which is the electrostatic potential anyways due to a charge plus q, right? Which is our ion in this case, and it will get multiplied by an exponential factor minus r, or distance, divided by this factor, which is square root of epsilon naught into electron temperature divided by 2 times the density of the plasma. Now, what does this equation say? Okay, this equation says that at a distance of around this denominator term, okay, uh, what will happen to the electrostatic potential? It will, it is already decreasing as a function of r, okay. Even that decrease in the function of r will decrease by a factor of 1 by e at this distance. And that is the reason why that distance of square root of Te by n naught, so that distance is called as Debye length. All right, Debye length, and this is the formula, and this is the formula for Debye length in centimeter. All right, and for distances greater than this Debye length, obviously plasma can be treated as a neutral, and that is why, if you remember, when I was explaining what a plasma is, what I was trying to say is that any you will design whatever the design you will do around the plasma, the minimum length of that chamber, okay, the minimum length should be much greater than the Debye length. And here I'm now what I've drawn, these things are the Debye spheres, which are at a distance of Debye length from each ion. All right. So what these Debye spheres are now, Debye spheres are indicating, they are the ones at which the effect of the electrostatic potential of from an ion vanishes. All right. So that Debye, the meaning of Debye sphere is the electrostatic interaction, okay, is very low between this ion and, let's say, this electron, or this ion and this ion. Why? Because both this electron and this ion is outside the Debye Debye sphere of this ion. All right. So this is the meaning of basically Debye length. That out, if you have your chamber designed in such a manner that it is much greater than Debye length, then you can treat whatever the plasma has generated as quasi-neutral. Neutral or quasi-neutral. Quasi because it's a semi-neutral. Because why? Because if you check the characteristic lengths to the scale of Debye length, obviously now it won't be neutral. Okay, for that distance it won't be neutral. So what can happen is that an electron can, let's say it hits this sheath boundary. All right, sheath is again cathode dark space, or only containing only positively charged ions, and that's why electron can get repelled and can come here, as I showed you. And once it enters inside this Debye sphere, what will happen is that it will now start showing an attraction towards the positively charged ion, and because of that attraction it can recombine with that ion and make it a neutral species. And once it becomes a neutral species, obviously the Debye sphere will go off. Okay, all right, and it's just then a neutral species. All right, so this is one process that can happen. All right. Another process that can happen inside plasma is that let's say because of the random thermal motion, this ion, as you saw earlier, came close, and these two Debye spheres are now intersecting. That is, now there is a significant electrostatic interaction between these two ions. And once this thing happens, obviously they will now start showing repulsion, right? So what I wanted to show is that is the importance of Debye length, basically. So what Debye length is showing you is how a plasma is going to basically get sustained. All right. So right now I didn't talk about the creation of plasma. I am talking about the sustenance of plasma. So Debye length basically explains the sustenance of plasma. That is the different kinds of processes that will take place because of the electrostatic interaction as these randomly moving species get close to each other, or get away from each other, or they cause the recombination, let's say, right? So this is in short the explanation for the sustenance of plasma. What is the explanation then for the creation of plasma? All right. So the theories, is interesting that uh, what they say is that the initial electrons, they come from cosmic radiation, and then whatever the plasma creates, depending whatever the kind of coupling that the plasma creator creates with this gas here, sorry, that thing, uh, whatever that thing does, it basically imparts kinetic energy to these electrons, which are some of them which were already there in the cosmic radiation, and they start knocking off the outermost electrons from the neutral species, thus creating the ions. All right. So this is in short what the textbooks say how a plasma gets created. All right. So yeah, it's an interesting theory, and of course, whether they were the cosmic radiation, or whether the electrons were already present because of some quantum fluctuation, you can just put in any theory behind it. However, the scientists still don't know basically the exact reason for the initial amount of electrons that come into picture, and then which go on striking the neutral species to create the ionized species. All right, so that creation is still almost kind of a mystery. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I might be wrong. Maybe some person might be knowing much detail about this. However, this is the thing that I know from my reading from the books. Okay, another interesting aspect that I'm going to talk about is plasma sheath. And so, what is a sheath? A sheath is a, a space in the plasma wherein there are no electrons. And why there won't be any electrons? And where, first of all, where there won't be any electrons? Whenever the plasma will come in contact with a wall or some kind of barrier, charge exchange will happen, and that charge exchange will be governed by the ion frequency, ion response frequency, and the electron response frequency. Electrons being lighter, they will move faster, and as they will move, let's say towards the wall, and let's say recombine with, if it's a metallic wall, or then obviously it can, and that metal is connected to ground, and obviously the electrons can recombine. And then what happens is that that thing will expose a sheath, that is a space charge region wherein you have heavy ions present. All right, so that kind of sheath is what I'm showing here, let's say. So this figure is basically the same figure as the last one, except that I'm showing you a substrate on which I've placed a wafer, and I'm basically applying a negative pulse DC here with some particular T on by T off ratio. So a sheath is definitely going to form, because why? Because of the charge initial exchange, and because of the electrons being lighter and faster than the heavier ions. All right. So that is why a cathode dark space or a sheath gets formed. All right. Now, uh, all right. This the steady state expansion of the sheath is basically given by the Child-Langmuir limit, uh, which is basically this equation, which says that the steady state sheath that will be formed according to the Child-Langmuir limit will be proportional to the Debye length, the voltage that is being applied, all right, to the substrate, and the electron temperature. Typical electron temperature for plasma processing is around few volts, whereas the typical ion temperature is perhaps millivolts. So the electron temperature is much higher than the ion temperature, and that is a very important prerequisite. all right, which means that electrons are more energetic than ions basically inside the typical plasma processing for semiconductors, all right. Then however, uh, if the sheath now, because of the application, let's say I'm pulsing, okay, the wafer, if what will that imply, that what will that result in is that the sheath will expand in a transient fashion, and then in that case we can implant the substrate which is excited by, let's say, a given negative pulse potential, right? And in that case, S as a function of time is given by some S0 times 1/3 root of 2/3 omega pi t plus 1, where omega pi is the characteristic frequency of the ions, characteristic response frequency of the ions, which is in the megahertz range, whereas the characteristic frequency for electrons is in the range of gigahertz. All right, so because electrons are faster and having lower mass, right? That I already explained. All right. So what can happen because of the transient sheath expansion? The ions can get implanted, you know, if you if you adjust the pressure correctly and the inlet pressure correctly and the microwave power being coupled to form the plasma, let's say here correctly, that is, you have right amount of plasma bulk and the right amount of sheath expansion, then you can actually implant the wafer, all right. And once the ions get implanted, uh, you know, the ions which are backwards, they will all obviously take their position and they will also start getting implanted. And again, what will replenish these ions that proceeded further to implant the wafer? The ions from the bulk of the plasma, right? And that's why what will happen is that the bulk will get depleted of the ions, right? And bulk is already containing the ionization value of a typical plasma is 10 to the power minus 2. So now even these ions, if they get, you know, away from the bulk, that will deplete the bulk, right? Then the next question is, what will then replenish the bulk? Basically the neutral species that are being introduced by the gas inlet, right? These neutral species will come here, will interact with whatever the kind of coupling that the plasma creator creates here, and will get ionized, and then they will basically replenish the plasma, right? So then what is the most very important thing here to sustain the plasma bulk because of its depletion due to sheath expansion is the gas inlet. So if you don't have this gas inlet, you cannot sustain a plasma for longer periods of time. Depending upon the gas and the configuration, you cannot sustain the plasma for longer periods of time, right? And perhaps now you can also correlate the reason why Tony Stark's arc reactor won't work, and that is because it doesn't have any gas inlet. And not only gas inlet, you also need to have a gas outlet. Why? Because you need to establish a particular equilibrium pressure. If let's say there is no turbomolecular pump here, you only have a gas inlet, then what will happen? Ultimately this plasma will extinguish because the ionization rate will basically ultimately fall below, let's say 10 to the power minus 3, it might go to 10 to the power minus 6. And the reason why that will happen is why? Because now you just have an inlet pressure, all right? The gas is coming in, it is increasing the pressure, increasing the pressure. A time will come wherein the neutral species will far outnumber the ionized species, the ratio. And that will imply no very less recombination taking place, no glow discharge, and almost this will be then a heated gas. If at all this is getting heated, it will just be a heated gas and nothing more than a heated gas. It won't be in a so this gas won't be in a plasma state anymore. All right. So that also, does the Tony Stark's arc reactor have a turbomolecular pump? Obviously it doesn't have. So gas inlet and a pump are the reasons why Tony Stark's arc reactor won't work. All right. So this is this was a fun part. I really enjoyed explaining this. All right, guys. Now coming back to this picture. Suppose you have, let's say, a target suspended here. All right, and let's say the ions bombard the target, and then the target sputters and then falls on the wafer and deposits some material on the wafer. So this process is actually called as sputtering. All right. So you can use the same design perhaps without the pulse DC power supply, just the RF coupled, this plasma source and a target here, and then you can use this particular, species, the plasma species, the ions to etch, the sputter, sorry, not etch, sputter that target and let's say deposit it on the wafer. All right. So this explains the sputtering application. All right. So I already explained the ion implantation, and I already now explained the sputtering. All right, application. Another example is etching. So if let's say there is a photoresist on the wafer, and let's say you have created this sheath and ions containing in that sheath, and let's say you utilize a particular chemistry that, let's say, these ions have with that etching material, then you can easily etch away that material based on the chemistry. However, in this case, it is the chemistry of the ions towards that particular material that was used to form the barrier, right? So such kind of actually etching is also called as reactive ion etching. All right. So this in short explains the sheath sheath physics of the plasmas, and it is very important in plasma processing. I explained you now the plasma bulk, basically the plasma electrostatics in the bulk, and which defines the plasma, which sustains the plasma. Then I also explained Debye length, which comes out of it, concept of Debye length. Later on, I also explained the concept of sheath and the transient sheath, the steady state sheath and the transient sheath. The transient sheath is basically responsible for ion implantation, and yeah, if you don't want to use the transient sheath, even the steady state sheath can be used to do an etching process, or let's say a sputtering process, right? But you might ask a question, hey, you didn't talk about the plasma creator. It was just kind of some fictitious thing for us. No, it is not. So this figure here shows a cross-sectional view of a inductively coupled plasma source or plasma creator. Plasma source, plasma creator, this mean the same thing. Integrated with the vacuum chamber used for reactive ion etching. Okay, so what this is, it's a coil or an inductive coil, and there is a quartz window here through which the electromagnetic field gets coupled here, and what the it basically produces a magnetic field in the vertical direction, a time varying magnetic field, which in turn creates a time varying electric field in a circular manner here, like this, inside the chamber, which in turns creates a ohmic heating and also stochastic heating. Both of these kind of heatings are the causes of the creation of plasma. If you want to know further details for these two kinds of heating, ohmic heating and stochastic heating, you might want to refer to the books on this topic. I won't go into detail of that. So because of those, of course, eddy currents, plasma is created. And if you ask me the question, okay, from where did the electrons come from initially? Because initially it was just a neutral gas here, right? And again, to explain that, people explain it using perhaps cosmic radiation, and maybe some people might explain using some weird quantum phenomena. However, that is beyond the scope of this tutorial, and I will not delve into it further. All right. So right figure, I mean the right sub part of this figure also shows that if you increase the RF input power here to this coil, obviously the plasma density increases, and at a certain point of time, so a certain point of input power, it transitions into a uh, purely inductively coupled discharge. So here they say this is capacitively coupled till here. Capacitive coupling, which will be meaning that the electric field is the main thing that is creating this plasma, and inductively coupled means that the magnetic field will be the main creator of the plasma here, basically, right? So this inductively coupled plasma creator or plasma source is one of the types, and which actually takes the shape of capacitively coupled plasma source for lower input RF power. Then there is another kind of way by which you can create plasma, and that is electron cyclotron resonance. And also another type is helicon plasma source. These two I will not explain in detail because that will then extend this lecture to this tutorial to a very long time. So suffice to say, a plasma creator is also a very important part of a plasma semiconductor processing equipment, and ultimately basically the way it generates is through either capacitive, that is electric field coupling, or the magnetic field coupling to the gas. All right. So these are the references that I've used for this presentation. One is this Andre Anders. He has got a handbook of plasma implantation and deposition. It's a very standard book. Another very kind of slightly older but very standard book on plasma discharges and material processing is this from Lieberman and Littenberg. If you guys are interested in knowing more about the principles of plasma discharges and their application to semiconductor processing, then these 1 and 2 are the books basically to refer to. And 3 and 4 are the references that the 3 is basically the reference that I mentioned for the inductively coupled plasma source. And fourth is if I have, because I designed a plasma immersion ion implanter for IIT Mumbai way back in 2005-6 time frame. So actually, just after that, I did create a wiki entry for that. So that the Wikipedia entry for plasma immersion ion implantation was originally created by me, and then later on, many people basically modified this entry. And so if you guys want to have a look at it and the details on this kind of implanter, ion implanter, then I would suggest you to go to this Wikipedia article by me. So as usual, yeah, I would love to have questions from you guys. And all right, this was enough of a digression, and next time I would like to talk. I will come back to semiconductors, and perhaps I will talk about BSIM4 extraction, the remaining steps, perhaps in detail. So in the meantime, if you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer these. All right, bye. Have a nice time.